This is a fictional American romance story created using AI for entertainment purposes only, intended strictly for audiences 18 years and older and not suitable for children under 18.
The rain in Manhattan that evening felt heavier than usual, as if the sky itself carried a burden it couldn't release. Ethan Caldwell stood by the window of his office, 30 floors above the city, watching droplets slide down the glass like slow tears. The skyline, once a symbol of everything he had built, blurred into something distant, almost irrelevant. Behind him, his phone buzzed again. 3 missed calls, all from Vanessa. He didn't pick up, not yet. The doctor's words still echoed in his mind, too sharp, too final to process. Stage 3, aggressive progression. We need to start treatment immediately. Ethan had nodded then, calm, collected, the way he always was in meetings, negotiations, crises. Years of professional discipline had trained him well, but this wasn't a project he could manage. This wasn't something he could fix. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the folded report. The paper trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from something deeper, something he refused to name. For a long moment, he just stared at it. Then his phone rang again. Vanessa. This time, he answered. Ethan? Her voice came sharp, impatient. Not worried, just annoyed. Where are you? You said you'd be home early. He swallowed. I was at the hospital. A pause. Not the kind filled with fear, the kind filled with calculation. Why? Ethan closed his eyes briefly. I wasn't feeling well these past few weeks. I thought it was just stress. And? He let out a slow breath. They found something. Silence again. Longer this time. Then finally, what do you mean, something? Her tone had shifted slightly softer, but still controlled. Ethan turned away from the window, sinking into his chair. It's serious, Vanessa. Another pause. Are you saying cancer? The word hung between them like something toxic. Yes. He expected something to break then. A gasp, tears, even anger. Anything. Instead, Vanessa exhaled sharply. You've got to be kidding me. Ethan blinked. I just got off a call with Lucas, she continued, her voice tightening. We're about to close the biggest deal of the year, Ethan. I don't have time for this. He said nothing, because suddenly there was nothing left to say. I'll be home late, she added. We'll talk then. The line went dead. Ethan lowered the phone slowly, staring at the blank screen. The city outside continued its restless rhythm. Cars moving, lights flickering, people rushing through lives that hadn't been abruptly rewritten in a single afternoon. He sat there for a long time, alone. Vanessa didn't come home until after midnight. Ethan was still awake, sitting in the dimly lit living room, the television flickering silently in the background. He hadn't moved much, hadn't eaten. The door opened with a soft click. He looked up. Vanessa stepped inside, heels in one hand, her coat draped elegantly over her arm. She looked immaculate, as always, hair perfectly styled, makeup flawless, as if she had just stepped out of a magazine cover. Not like someone whose husband had just been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness. You're still up? She asked, mildly surprised. Ethan nodded. She walked past him, setting her things down with practiced ease. I had dinner with clients. Lucas was there. We made good progress. Of course he was. Lucas. Ethan had heard that name more often lately. Too often. Vanessa, he said quietly. She glanced at him. What? We need to talk. She sighed, rubbing her temple. Ethan, it's been a long day. So has mine. That made her pause. For a brief second, something flickered in her eyes. Not empathy, but irritation at being challenged. Fine, she said, sitting across from him. Talk. Ethan studied her face. He tried to find the woman he had fallen in love with. The one who used to laugh too loudly at bad jokes. Who used to hold his hand like it meant something. But she felt distant, like a memory he couldn't quite reach. The diagnosis is serious, he said. They want to start treatment immediately. Chemotherapy, maybe surgery. Vanessa leaned back slightly, crossing her arms. And what does that mean for you? She asked. For me? He let out a quiet, almost disbelieving breath. It means I might not. He stopped himself. Vanessa tilted her head. Might not what? It means things are going to change. Another silence. Then she laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly, but enough. Ethan, she said, shaking her head slightly. Everyone has problems. You're not the only one dealing with pressure. Something inside him cracked. Not loudly, but enough. I'm not talking about pressure, he said. And I'm not talking about playing the victim, she shot back. You've always been strong. Don't start acting fragile now. Fragile. The word settled heavily in the room. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her this time, and for the first time, he understood something he had been avoiding. She wasn't scared, she was disappointed. Disappointed that he had become inconvenient. "I'll handle it," he said quietly. Vanessa stood up, already losing interest in the conversation. "Good, because I can't afford distractions right now." She walked toward the bedroom, then paused briefly. "Oh, and try not to tell too many people," she added casually. "We don't need this affecting my image." The door closed behind her. Ethan remained where he was, still, silent, as the weight of everything finally began to settle, not just the illness, but something far worse. The slow, undeniable realization that he was already facing it alone. The ballroom shimmered with artificial perfection. Crystal chandeliers cascaded light over polished marble floors, reflecting off champagne glasses and sequin dresses. It was one of those elite Manhattan gatherings, half business, half performance, where success was measured not only by wealth, but by appearances. And tonight, appearances mattered more than ever. Vanessa Caldwell stood at the center of it all. Her black silk gown hugged her frame with effortless precision, every detail curated to command attention. A glass of champagne rested lightly between her fingers as she laughed at something Lucas Grant had just said. Her head tilted back, her posture relaxed, confident. She looked radiant, untouchable. Ethan noticed how easily she fit into that world without him. He stood near the edge of the room, slightly apart from the crowd, his dark suit hanging a little looser than before. The past few weeks had changed him in ways no one here could fully see, but some could sense. Whispers had already begun. "Isn't that Ethan Caldwell? I heard he's been sick." "Really? He doesn't look well." He ignored them, or at least he tried to. Across the room, Vanessa hadn't looked at him once, not when he arrived, not when their eyes briefly met, not even now. Lucas leaned closer to her, murmuring something into her ear. She smiled soft, amused, intimate in a way that made Ethan's chest tighten. That smile used to belong to him. "Ethan!" A voice broke through the noise. He turned to see Margaret Whitmore, Vanessa's mother, approaching with a tight, polite smile. Her husband, Richard Whitmore, followed closely behind, his expression more guarded, more observant. "You made it," Margaret said, glancing him over in a way that felt less like concern and more like evaluation. "Vanessa mentioned you weren't feeling well." Ethan nodded slightly. "I'm managing." Richard crossed his arms. "Work stress?" Ethan hesitated. For a brief second, he considered telling the truth, but then he remembered Vanessa's words. "We don't need this affecting my image." Something like that, he replied quietly. Margaret gave a small dismissive hum. "Well, you should take better care of yourself. Vanessa's career is taking off. You wouldn't want to slow her down." The words landed harder than she probably intended, or maybe exactly as intended. Ethan didn't respond. Before the silence could deepen, Vanessa's voice rang out across the room. "Mom! Dad!" All heads turned. She was approaching now, Lucas at her side, her heels clicking confidently against the marble floor. Conversations around them softened, attention shifting subtly toward the unfolding scene. Vanessa stopped just a few steps away from Ethan. For the first time that evening, she looked directly at him. Her gaze flickered briefly, taking in his paler complexion, the faint shadows beneath his eyes. Then something colder replaced it. "Well," she said lightly, lifting her glass, "look who decided to show up." A few people nearby chuckled politely. Ethan held her gaze. "It's your event." She hummed. "I wasn't sure you'd have the energy." Lucas smirked faintly beside her, slipping one hand into his pocket. "Ethan," he said, tone smooth, almost friendly. "Good to see you. Heard you've been under the weather." The pause was deliberate, loaded. Ethan gave a small nod. Something like that. Vanessa let out a soft laugh. "Oh, don't be so vague," she said, turning slightly so her voice carried just enough for others nearby to hear. "Ethan's been very dramatic lately." A ripple of curiosity spread through the small crowd forming around them. Margaret frowned slightly. "Vanessa, what?" Vanessa shrugged, smiling as if everything she said was harmless. He went to the hospital over a few headaches and now suddenly it's a whole crisis. Ethan felt the air shift. This wasn't private anymore. It was a performance. "It's not just headaches," he said quietly. Vanessa tilted her head. "Then what is it?" There it was, the moment. Dozens of eyes, waiting, watching. Ethan's throat tightened, but before he could answer, "Oh, come on," Vanessa interrupted, rolling her eyes lightly. "Don't tell me you're going to make a scene here." A few awkward laughs echoed. Lucas stepped closer to her, his presence solid, supportive on her side. "Vanessa," Ethan said, his voice lower now, strained. "This isn't the place." She raised an eyebrow. Exactly. Which is why you shouldn't have brought your situation here. Situation. Not illness, not diagnosis, just inconvenience. Margaret shifted uncomfortably. Vanessa, maybe we should... No, Mom, Vanessa said firmly, not breaking eye contact with Ethan. If he's going to act like this, people deserve to know why. Ethan felt something hollow open inside his chest. Not anger, not even pain, just emptiness. You want to know? Vanessa continued, turning slightly toward the surrounding guests. My husband thinks he's dying. A murmur spread instantly. Shock, curiosity, disbelief. Ethan closed his eyes for half a second. That was it. There was no taking it back now. Vanessa let out a soft, almost amused exhale. The doctors might have found something serious, but honestly, you should see him at home. It's like living with a ghost already. A few people shifted awkwardly. Others exchanged glances, but no one stepped in. No one stopped her. Lucas chuckled under his breath. That's a bit harsh, don't you think? Vanessa smiled at him warmly this time. I'm just being realistic. Then she looked back at Ethan, and that warmth vanished. You've always been strong, Ethan, she said, her voice dropping just enough to feel personal yet still public. So stop acting weak. It's embarrassing. The word echoed louder than anything else. Embarrassing. Ethan felt every eye on him, every judgment, every unspoken thought. And in that moment, something inside him finally settled. A quiet, irreversible understanding. He wasn't losing Vanessa, he had already lost her. A long time ago. I see, he said softly. Vanessa blinked, slightly thrown off by the calmness in his voice. Ethan straightened a little, his posture regaining a fragment of the quiet dignity he used to carry so naturally. I didn't realize my illness was such a burden to your image, he continued. Vanessa's expression tightened. Don't twist my words. I'm not. Their eyes locked, and for the first time that night there was no performance left. Just truth, raw, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Ethan nodded once, then he turned. No dramatic exit, no raised voice, just a man walking away from something that no longer belonged to him. Behind him, the whispers grew louder. Vanessa stood frozen for a second, something flickering across her face, irritation maybe, or something she refused to acknowledge. Lucas leaned closer. You okay? She forced a small smile, lifting her glass again. Of course, she said. Why wouldn't I be? But across the room, near the exit, Ethan paused briefly. Not to look back, but to steady himself, because even silence had weight, and tonight it had finally become unbearable. The hospital smelled like antiseptic and quiet resignation. It was the kind of place where time moved differently, slower, heavier, as if every second carried consequences no one wanted to name out loud. Outside the large window, Manhattan continued its relentless rhythm. Taxis honking, people rushing, life unfolding without pause. But inside room 417, everything felt suspended. Ethan Caldwell sat upright in his hospital bed, pale under the muted fluorescent lights. The IV line attached to his arm traced a thin, fragile connection between him and the slow drip of medication that kept his body stable, but did nothing for the storm inside him. The diagnosis still lingered like a shadow. Stage 3. Aggressive, uncertain outcomes. He had spent the last 2 days in this room, undergoing tests, consultations, evaluations. Doctors came and went, their voices clinical, careful. Nurses offered polite smiles, practiced empathy, but none of it mattered, because the one person who should have been there wasn't. Not until now. The sound of heels echoed down the hallway before the door even opened. Ethan didn't need to look to know it was her. Vanessa entered the room like she was stepping into a meeting, not a hospital. Her coat was tailored, her makeup flawless, her posture composed to perfection. Behind her, Lucas followed, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable but present. Always present. A few seconds later, Margaret and Richard Whitmore stepped in as well. 4 people, all standing, all watching. Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. Not from the illness, from the realization that this wasn't a visit. It was something else. Something planned. You look worse than I expected, Vanessa said casually, her eyes scanning him from head to toe. No warmth, no hesitation, just observation. Ethan let out a quiet breath. Good to see you too. Margaret cleared her throat softly. Vanessa insisted be calm. It's an important discussion. Important. The word echoed strangely in a room filled with machines and silence. Ethan's gaze shifted briefly to Lucas. I didn't realize he was part of the family now. Lucas didn't flinch. I'm just here for support. Support. Ethan almost smiled, but didn't. Vanessa stepped closer to the bed, her heels clicking sharply against the tiled floor. She didn't sit, didn't soften. She remained standing, looking down at him. I'll be direct, she said. Of course she would. I think it's time we end this. The words landed without ceremony. No build-up, no hesitation, just final. Ethan blinked once. He had expected distance, coldness, even cruelty, but not this. Not here. You're asking for a divorce, he said quietly. I'm stating it, Vanessa corrected. Let's not pretend this marriage still makes sense. Ethan's fingers tightened slightly against the hospital sheet. Because I'm sick? Vanessa exhaled, clearly irritated. Because everything is about to change, Ethan. Your condition, your career, your future, it's all uncertain. And that makes me disposable? That makes you a liability. The word hung in the air like something toxic. Margaret shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Richard looked away, his silence heavier than any words. Ethan noticed. Of course he did. They weren't here to stop her. They were here to witness, to approve. To protect your image? Ethan asked softly. Vanessa's expression hardened. To protect my life? A faint, bitter taste rose in his throat. My life doesn't have space for this, she added, gesturing vaguely toward him, the machines, the room. I worked too hard to get where I am. And I didn't? He asked. Vanessa didn't answer, because she didn't need to. Her silence said everything. Luca stepped forward slightly, placing a hand on Vanessa's back, a subtle gesture, but intimate enough to make its meaning clear. Ethan saw it. He had seen it before, at the party, in the glances, in the spaces between words. Now it was undeniable. How long? Ethan asked. Vanessa frowned. What? How long has this been going on? A brief pause. Then, that's not relevant. It was answer enough. Ethan nodded slowly. Something inside him, whatever had been holding on, finally let go. Vanessa reached into her bag and pulled out a folder, crisp, prepared, final. She placed it on the small table beside his bed and slid it toward him. Divorce papers, she said. Everything's already arranged. It's clean, efficient. Efficient. Of course it was. Ethan stared at the folder. For a long moment no one spoke. The machines continued their steady rhythm. Beep, beep, beep. Margaret finally broke the silence. It's for the best, Ethan. Given the circumstances, Richard added quietly, you need to focus on your health, not on your marriage, not on your wife, just your illness. Ethan almost laughed, but the sound never came. You brought them here, he said, looking at Vanessa. To make sure this doesn't get complicated, she replied. No shame, no regret, just control. Ethan reached for the folder. His hand trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from the weight of what it represented. He opened it slowly. Pages of legal language, assets, separation terms, signatures waiting to be filled. Vanessa crossed her arms. I don't want delays, Ethan. He looked up at her, really looked, trying, one last time, to find something human in her expression, something that resembled the woman he once loved. But there was nothing, just distance, calculation, and a faint trace of impatience. Do you ever think, he said quietly, about what happens if you're wrong? Vanessa's brow furrowed. About what? About me. She let out a short, humorless laugh. You're not going to magically recover and become some kind of hero, Ethan. Luca smirked slightly. Margaret remained silent. Richard looked at the floor. Ethan nodded. Right, he said. Of course. Why would she believe in him? She never had to. He picked up the pen. The room seemed to hold its breath. For a second, just one, his hand paused above the paper. Not because he didn't know what to do, but because this was the last moment where something could still be different, where someone could stop this, say something, change anything. No one did. Vanessa watched, waiting, expecting. Ethan lowered the pen and signed. His name flowed across the paper with quiet finality. Ethan Caldwell. It looked the same as it always had, but it didn't feel the same. Not anymore. He set the pen down gently. It's done, he said. Vanessa stepped forward immediately, taking the papers, scanning them quickly. A small, satisfied exhale escaped her lips. Good, she said. Lucas placed a hand on her shoulder. Let's go, we're already late. Vanessa nodded. She didn't look at Ethan again, not as she turned, not as she walked toward the door, not even as she left. Margaret lingered for half a second, offering a tight, almost apologetic smile. Take care of yourself, she said. Richard gave a brief nod, then they were gone. The door closed softly behind them, and just like that, the room was empty again. Ethan sat there, staring at the space where they had been. The silence returned, heavier than before, but clearer, cleaner, because now there was nothing left to lose. He leaned back slowly against the pillow, closing his eyes, and for the first time since the diagnosis, a strange sense of calm settled over him. Not hope, not relief, but something close. Because sometimes, the worst thing that can happen is also the thing that sets you free. New York had a way of forgetting people. Not slowly, not gently, but completely. Within weeks of the divorce, Ethan Caldwell's name began to fade from conversations that once revolved around him. His architecture firm released a brief statement, something vague about medical leave and temporary restructuring. Clients moved on. Colleagues adapted. The city adjusted, as it always did. And then, he was gone. No public appearances, no updates, no trace. Even the whispers about his illness eventually lost their urgency, dissolving into something distant, almost irrelevant. In a city that thrived on momentum, stillness was the same as disappearance, and Ethan had become still. Vanessa Caldwell, on the other hand, had never been more visible. 3 months after the divorce, her name appeared everywhere. Business magazines, industry panels, social media feeds curated to perfection. She had rebranded herself with quiet precision, dropping Caldwell from her public identity, reclaiming her maiden name, Vanessa Whitmore. The narrative was subtle but deliberate. Independent, resilient, forward-moving, unaffected. Or at least, that was the story she told the world. People don't remember weakness, she said one evening, adjusting her reflection in the mirror of her high-rise apartment. They remember who rises above it. Lucas leaned against the doorway behind her, watching with a faint, approving smile. "And you've always been good at rising," he said. Vanessa met his gaze through the mirror. "Yes," she replied softly. "I have." Their relationship had evolved quickly after the divorce. What had once been whispers and stolen glances was now public, polished, undeniable. They attended events together, sat side by side at high-level meetings, appeared in carefully staged photos that circulated through elite circles. They weren't just a couple. They were a brand. Lucas Grant and Vanessa Whitmore, the city's most dynamic power duo. That was how one headline put it. And Vanessa didn't correct it. At a private rooftop gathering overlooking Central Park, the air buzzed with quiet admiration. "Vanessa!" She turned, her smile already in place as a group of executives approached. "You've been impossible to ignore lately," one of them said, raising his glass. "That last campaign? Brilliant." "Thank you," Vanessa replied smoothly. "We had the right team." Lucas stepped in effortlessly, and the right leadership. The compliment landed exactly where it was meant to. Vanessa glanced at him briefly, grateful but also aware. Everything between them had become strategic, even affection. "Is it true you're closing the partnership with Harrington Global?" another voice asked. Vanessa nodded. "We're in the final stages." "That's a massive deal." "It is," she said simply. What she didn't say was how much she needed it. Because success, in her world, wasn't just about achievement. It was about validation. And she had something to prove. Not to Ethan, not anymore, but to everyone who had seen her walk away from a dying husband. Even if they never said it out loud, she knew they had judged her. So she worked harder, smiled brighter, won bigger, until there was no room left for doubt. Later that night, as the crowd thinned and the city lights stretched endlessly beneath them, Vanessa stood alone by the edge of the rooftop. The wind tugged lightly at her hair. For a moment, everything was quiet. Lucas joined her, handing her a fresh glass of champagne. "You were impressive tonight," he said. Vanessa took the glass. "I always am." He chuckled softly, confident, realistic. They stood side by side, looking out over the city. After a pause, Lucas spoke again. "You never talk about him." Vanessa's fingers tightened slightly around the glass. "There's nothing to talk about. He just disappeared." "That's what people do," she said, her tone flat. "They fade when they stop being relevant." Lucas studied her profile. "You don't believe that," he said. Vanessa turned to him, her expression unreadable. "Don't I?" For a second, something flickered beneath the surface. Not regret, not quite, but something close to discomfort. Then it was gone. "Ethan made his choices," she continued, "and I made mine." Lucas nodded slowly. "And you don't regret it?" Vanessa held his gaze. "No," she said, and this time she meant it, or at least she needed to. Across the city, far from the lights and the noise, Ethan Caldwell was still alive. The hospital room was quieter now, less urgent, the machines fewer, the prognosis uncertain, but something had changed, not just in his condition, but in him. He sat by the window of a different room now, sunlight replacing the cold artificial glow of before. A folder rested on his lap, thicker than the medical reports that had once defined his future. This one was different. Inside were documents. Legal, corporate, personal. A name appeared repeatedly across the pages. Caldwell International Group. A company he had spent years avoiding. A legacy he had chosen to walk away from. His father's empire. A man he hadn't spoken to in over a decade. Until recently. Ethan's grip tightened slightly on the folder. The memory was still fresh. The phone call. The silence on the other end before his father's voice finally spoke. "I heard you're sick." No warmth, no sympathy, just fact. Ethan had almost hung up. Almost. But something stopped him. Maybe it was the diagnosis. Maybe it was the divorce. Or maybe it was the realization that he had nothing left tying him to the life he once knew. "I am," Ethan had replied. A pause. Then, "Come see me." Now, weeks later, Ethan stared at the documents in his hands. His father had died 2 days ago. A sudden cardiac arrest. No warning, no reconciliation. Just an ending. And with it, an inheritance. Not just money, but power, responsibility, control. The entire Caldwell International Group now belonged to him. Ethan exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. Outside, the city moved as it always did, unaware, unchanged. But something inside him had shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but enough. Because for the first time since everything had fallen apart, he wasn't just surviving, he was rebuilding. Quietly, deliberately, piece by piece. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface, a question began to take shape. Not about revenge, not about Vanessa, but about what came next. Ethan closed the folder. His reflection stared back at him from the window, still pale, still marked by everything he had endured. But no longer broken. Not completely, not anymore. Across the city, Vanessa raised her glass in another room filled with laughter and light. "To new beginnings," someone said. She smiled, and drank. Unaware that the past she had so easily discarded was already finding its way back. Stronger, quieter, and far more dangerous than she could imagine. The ballroom at the Grand Astoria Hotel was brighter than any night Vanessa could remember. Not because of the chandeliers, though they glittered like suspended constellations above the polished marble floor. Not because of the press, though cameras flashed in sharp bursts, capturing every calculated smile, every handshake, every moment that could be turned into a headline. It was brighter because tonight mattered. This wasn't just another event. This was the event. "Relax," Lucas murmured beside her, adjusting his cufflinks with practiced ease. "You've done this 100 times." Vanessa didn't look at him. Her eyes were fixed on the stage at the far end of the room, where a long table had been set for the signing ceremony. Behind it stood a massive screen displaying the name of the partnership in bold, elegant letters. Whitmore Communications, ex Caldwell International Group. Her chest tightened slightly. "Do we know who's representing Caldwell?" she asked, keeping her voice low. Lucas shook his head. Chairman's been elusive. No public appearances, no interviews, just signatures and results. Vanessa frowned faintly. Strange for someone running a company that size. "Some people don't need attention," Lucas replied. "Power speaks for itself." Vanessa didn't respond. Something about that unsettled her, but she pushed it aside. Tonight wasn't about uncertainty, it was about victory. The room filled quickly. Executives, investors, media figures, everyone who mattered had shown up. Conversations flowed like champagne, light and sparkling on the surface, but always carrying an undercurrent of competition. Vanessa moved through the crowd effortlessly, her smile precise, her posture flawless. Every glance, every word, every gesture was controlled. She was control. "Vanessa!" A reporter approached, microphone already raised. "How does it feel to be leading one of the biggest deals of the year?" She turned smoothly, her expression warm but composed. "It's the result of months of work from an incredible team. We're excited about what this partnership represents for the future." "And Caldwell International?" the reporter pressed. "Any comments on their leadership?" Vanessa hesitated for half a second. Just half. "They've been impressive," she said. "Strategic, focused. We're looking forward to working closely with their chairman." The word lingered in her mind. Chairman. a man she had never met, a man who had stayed hidden behind layers of silence and results, a man who tonight would finally step into the light. Ladies and gentlemen, the host's voice rang out, cutting through the hum of the room. If you could please take your seats, we are about to begin. The crowd shifted, chairs sliding softly against the floor as people settled. Vanessa sat at the front table, Lucas beside her. Her heart beat just a little faster, not from nerves, from anticipation. Across the table, a single empty chair waited, reserved. For him, the representative of Caldwell International, the man who had the power to finalize everything. Vanessa adjusted her posture slightly, smoothing her dress. "Ready?" Lucas whispered. She nodded. "Always." The host continued, his voice smooth, practiced. "Tonight marks a significant milestone, an alliance between two powerful forces in the industry." Vanessa listened, but only partially. Her attention drifted to the empty chair, to the door at the side of the stage, waiting. "And now it is my honor to introduce the chairman of Caldwell International Group." The room stilled, a subtle shift, the kind that happens when something important is about to unfold. Vanessa's fingers tightened slightly against the table. The door opened. Footsteps echoed, slow, measured, confident. And then, he stepped into the light. At first, it didn't make sense. Her mind rejected it before her eyes could fully process what they were seeing, because it was impossible. It had to be. But the figure moved closer, clearer, real, and suddenly there was no denying it. Vanessa's breath caught. Her entire body went still. "No," she whispered, barely audible. Beside her, Lucas stiffened. What the hell? Ethan Caldwell walked across the stage, alive, steady, and completely unrecognizable from the man she had left behind. The pallor was gone, the weakness replaced by something sharper, quieter, controlled strength. His suit was immaculate, tailored to perfection. His posture straight, his gaze calm as it swept across the room without hesitation, without searching, until, for the briefest moment, his eyes met hers. Vanessa felt something drop inside her chest, not like fear, not yet. Something deeper, something colder. Shock. Pure, undeniable shock. The room erupted into applause, but she couldn't hear it, couldn't feel it. All she could see was him. "Thank you," Ethan said, his voice steady, carrying effortlessly through the room. The same voice, and yet not the same at all. "I appreciate everyone being here tonight." Vanessa's hands trembled slightly beneath the table. This wasn't possible. He was supposed to be sick, dying, gone. But he stood there, stronger than ever, more composed than she had ever seen him. "How?" Lucas muttered under his breath. Vanessa didn't answer, because she didn't know. Ethan continued, his tone calm, measured. Caldwell International has always believed in long-term vision, in resilience, in building something that lasts beyond temporary setbacks. His words were deliberate, each one landing with quiet precision. Vanessa felt them like pressure against her skin. "A few months ago," he added, "I experienced what I believe to be a serious health crisis." A murmur spread through the room. Vanessa's heart pounded. No, 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 no. However, Ethan continued, further evaluation revealed that the initial diagnosis was incorrect. The world tilted. Misdiagnosis. The word echoed in her mind like something breaking. "I am, in fact," he said, his gaze briefly sweeping across the audience again, never lingering, never softening, perfectly healthy. Silence. Then whispers. Louder, faster. The room buzzed with shock, curiosity, disbelief. Vanessa felt like she couldn't breathe. Her chest tightened, her vision narrowing. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not like this. "And during that time," Ethan continued, as if nothing had shifted, "I stepped away from public life to reassess my priorities." His fingers rested lightly on the back of the chair in front of him. "Following the passing of my father, I assumed full leadership of Caldwell International Group." Another wave of murmurs, stronger this time, because now it all made sense. The silence, the sudden rise, the unseen chairman, it had been him, all along. Vanessa's grip on the edge of the table tightened, her nails pressed into the surface, grounding her in a moment that felt unreal. Beside her, Lucas leaned forward slightly, his expression no longer confident, now calculating. "Why didn't you tell me?" he whispered sharply. Vanessa turned to him, her voice barely controlled. "I didn't know, and for the first time, that was the truth." Ethan took his seat across from them, directly across, close enough to see every detail, every reaction, but he didn't look at her again. Not immediately. The host, clearly trying to regain control, forced a smile. Well, this is certainly unexpected, but what a remarkable turn of events. Vanessa barely heard him. Her world had narrowed to the man sitting across from her. The man she had humiliated, abandoned, erased. And now, he was the most powerful person in the room. Shall we proceed with the signing? The host asked. Ethan nodded once. Of course. Calm, unbothered, untouchable. Documents were placed on the table, pens followed. Everything moved as planned. Except, nothing was the same. Vanessa picked up her pen. Her hand trembled. Just slightly, but enough for him to notice. And this time Ethan looked at her. Really looked. Not with anger, not with bitterness, but with something far more devastating. Indifference. You may begin, he said quietly. Professional, distant, like she was nothing more than a business partner. Nothing more than a name on a contract. Vanessa swallowed hard, her throat dry, her pulse unsteady. She lowered her gaze to the document and signed. But this time, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like something else entirely. Something slipping, something collapsing, something she couldn't control. As the cameras flashed and applause filled the room once more, Vanessa forced a smile. Because that's what she did. That's what she always did. She performed. She adapted. She survived. But deep inside, a quiet, terrifying realization began to take shape. Ethan hadn't come back for her. He hadn't come back for revenge. He hadn't come back at all. He had simply moved on. And somehow, that hurt more than anything else. The headlines didn't stop. They multiplied. By morning, every major business outlet had picked up the story. By afternoon, it had spread across social media, dissected, reframed, sensationalized. The chairman no one saw coming. From disappearance to dominance. Ethan Caldwell's return. Whitmore's past comes back to the table. Vanessa read them all, not because she wanted to, but because she couldn't stop. Her name appeared in nearly every article, tethered inseparably to his. Some painted her as irrelevant, others as opportunistic. A few more brutal highlighted the timeline of their divorce with unsettling precision. And beneath every polished paragraph, every curated sentence, there was judgment. Unspoken, but unmistakable. You need to get ahead of this. Lucas's voice cut through the silence of the apartment like something sharp. Vanessa lowered her phone slowly, placing it on the glass table in front of her. I am ahead of it, she said, her tone controlled. The deal went through, that's what matters. Lucas exhaled, pacing near the window. That's not what people are talking about. She didn't respond, because she knew. Of course she knew. They're connecting everything, he continued. Your divorce, his illness, the timing. Vanessa's jaw tightened. There's nothing to connect. His diagnosis was wrong. That's not my fault. Lucas stopped pacing, turning to look at her. No, he said, but the way you handled it is. The words landed harder than he intended, or maybe exactly as intended. Vanessa stood up slowly. Excuse me? Lucas held her gaze. I'm just saying optics matter, and right now, this doesn't look good. Optics? She repeated, a bitter edge creeping into her voice. That's what you're worried about? I'm worried about us, he shot back. Our reputation, our position. Vanessa let out a short, humorless laugh. Our position, she echoed. Funny, that sounds familiar. Lucas frowned. What's that supposed to mean? It means, she said, stepping closer, that I've heard that line before, almost word for word. For a second, something flickered across his face. Recognition. Then deflection. You're being emotional, he said. There it was, the shift. Subtle, but undeniable. Vanessa stared at him, and for the first time, she saw it clearly. Not the charm, not the confidence, but the calculation beneath it. You knew, she said quietly. Lucas's expression didn't change. Knew what? About him, Vanessa continued. About Caldwell International. About the chairman. Lucas hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. But it was enough. I had suspicions, he admitted, but nothing confirmed. Vanessa's chest tightened. And you didn't think to tell me? There was nothing to tell. That's not true. Lucas ran a hand through his hair, his patience thinning. Even if I did know, what difference would it have made? You were already divorced. The bluntness of it hit like a slap. Vanessa took a step back. Not physically, emotionally. Right, she said softly. Of course. Because to him, it had never been about Ethan, or her. Just opportunity. Days passed, then weeks, and the shift became impossible to ignore. Lucas stopped staying over as often. His messages grew shorter, his tone colder. At events, he no longer stood quite as close, no longer reached for her hand instinctively. The easy intimacy that once defined them had been replaced by something more distant, more careful. Lucas, Vanessa said one evening, catching up to him after a board meeting, we need to talk. He didn't stop walking. I have another meeting. You always have another meeting. That's because I'm busy. So am I. Then you understand. Vanessa stepped in front of him, forcing him to stop. No, she said firmly, I don't. Lucas exhaled, clearly irritated. What do you want me to say? The truth. He laughed lightly. The truth? Fine. The truth is, things are complicated right now. Because of Ethan. Lucas didn't deny it. That changes things, he said. How? Vanessa demanded. The deal is already signed. Deals can be restructured, alliances shift. And where do I fit into that? She asked, her voice tightening. Lucas looked at her. Really looked. Assessing, weighing. And for the first time, Vanessa felt like she was the one being evaluated. That depends, he said slowly, on how valuable you remain. The words echoed, cold, precise, familiar. Vanessa felt the air leave her lungs. You're unbelievable, she whispered. Lucas shrugged slightly. I'm realistic. The same word she had used, the same tone, the same detachment. And suddenly, she understood. Not just him, but everything. Later that night, Vanessa sat alone in her apartment. The city lights stretched endlessly beyond the glass, but they felt distant now, hollow. Her phone buzzed again. Another notification. Another article. This one was worse. Sources suggest internal tensions between Whitmore Communications and key partners following Caldwell's return. Her name was still there, but the tone had changed. Less admiration, more doubt. Vanessa closed her eyes. For a moment she let the silence settle, and in that silence, memories surfaced. The hospital, Ethan's face, the way he had looked at her when he signed the papers. Not angry, not pleading, just empty. She had thought it meant he was weak, that he had given up. But now she wasn't so sure. Because that same emptiness, that same quiet detachment, she had just seen it again. In Lucas, in herself, in the way everything around her was beginning to shift, to crack, to fall apart. Across the city, in a quiet office high above the streets, Ethan stood by the window once more. The same city, a different view. Behind him, a screen displayed projections, reports, strategies, numbers that told a story of growth, expansion, control. But his attention wasn't on them. It was on the reflection staring back at him. Steady, composed, changed. A soft knock came at the door. Come in, he said. His assistant stepped inside. Mr. Caldwell, there's been some instability reported within Whitmore Communications. Ethan didn't turn. Is that so? Yes, internal conflicts, potential restructuring. A pause. Do you want us to intervene? Ethan's gaze remained fixed on the city. No, he said calmly. Let it run its course. The assistant nodded, understood. She left quietly, the door closing behind her. Ethan stood there for a moment longer, silent, still. Because this wasn't revenge. It didn't need to be. Some things collapsed on their own. Back in her apartment, Vanessa opened her eyes. The silence felt heavier now, not peaceful, not calming, but suffocating. Because for the first time, she wasn't in control. And worse, she could feel it slipping, slowly, inevitably, like something already decided. The first sign wasn't loud, it never was. It came quietly, buried in an email Vanessa almost ignored. Subject: urgent. Contract discrepancy. Caldwell partnership. She stared at the screen in her office, the city stretching behind her like a distant illusion of control. The morning had started like any other meetings, calls, rehearsed confidence. But something about the word urgent felt different today, heavier. She clicked. The message was brief, clinical. We've identified inconsistencies in the financial disclosures submitted under your authorization. Immediate verification required before further proceedings. Vanessa frowned. Inconsistencies? That didn't make sense. Her team was meticulous. Every number, every clause, reviewed, double-checked, approved. Unless... Her stomach tightened. "Get me Lucas," she said sharply, already reaching for her phone. "He's in a meeting," her assistant replied. Then interrupted. There was a pause. "He's not in the building." Vanessa froze. "What do you mean he's not in the building?" "He hasn't been in since yesterday afternoon." Something cold slid down her spine. By noon, the situation had escalated. Emails turned into calls. Calls turned into accusations. The boardroom of Whitmore Communications filled quickly. Executives, legal advisors, faces drawn tight with tension. Vanessa stood at the head of the table, a stack of documents in front of her. "I've reviewed these," she said, her voice steady despite the pressure building around her. "These figures were not submitted by me." A senior partner leaned forward. "They carry your authorization code." "That doesn't mean I approved them. It means someone used your credentials," another added. "Which still makes you responsible." Vanessa's jaw tightened. "That's not how this works." "No," the first man replied coldly. "That's exactly how this works." A silence fell over the room, not uncertain, decided. Vanessa felt it, the shift, the distance. They weren't looking for answers. They were looking for someone to blame. And she was standing right there. "Where is Lucas?" she demanded. No one answered, not immediately. Then, one of the legal advisors cleared his throat. "Lucas Grant has submitted a statement." Vanessa turned sharply. "What statement?" He hesitated, then slid a document across the table. She picked it up. Her eyes moved quickly across the page, and then stopped. "No!" The word barely left her lips, but it was enough, because everything after that became clear. "I had concerns regarding Vanessa Whitmore's handling of the Caldwell partnership from the beginning. Certain decisions were made without full transparency." Vanessa's hands trembled. This wasn't just distancing, this was positioning. Carefully written, legally precise, every sentence crafted to do one thing: separate him from her and push her forward, alone. She's the one who insisted on accelerating the deal despite unresolved discrepancies. Vanessa looked up, her vision sharpening with disbelief. That's a lie. No one spoke. No one defended her. She had exclusive access to the final documents. Her chest tightened. Her pulse roared in her ears. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be. "He's setting me up," she said, her voice rising. "You can't actually believe this." The silence answered her. By evening, it was no longer internal. It was public. The headlines came faster this time, sharper, crueler. Whitmore under fire. Financial irregularities in major deal. Lucas Grant distances himself from scandal. Sources suggest internal misconduct at executive level. Her name wasn't just mentioned. It was highlighted, framed, defined. Vanessa Whitmore, once rising, now falling. She found Lucas that night, not at the office, not at the usual places, but at a private lounge downtown, where the music was low and the lighting soft enough to hide expressions people didn't want seen. He was sitting calmly, a drink in his hand, like nothing had happened. Vanessa walked straight toward him, her heels striking the floor with sharp, unforgiving rhythm. "Tell me this isn't real." Lucas looked up. No surprise, no guilt, just mild inconvenience. "You shouldn't be here," he said. Vanessa laughed, a sharp, broken sound. "That's what you have to say?" He set his glass down slowly. "You're making a scene. You framed me. Lower your voice." "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" she demanded, her voice trembling now not with weakness, but with something dangerously close to collapse. Lucas exhaled, leaning back slightly. "I didn't frame you. You signed a statement. I protected myself." The simplicity of it, the cold logic, it hit harder than any denial. Vanessa stared at him. "You used me." Lucas tilted his head slightly. "We used each other." "No," she said, shaking her head. "That's not the same." "Isn't it?" he replied calmly. "You left your husband when he got sick. You chose the stronger position." The words sliced through her, because they were true. Or at least, they sounded true. "And now," Lucas continued, his tone even, "the position has shifted." Vanessa's breath caught. "You're choosing him," she whispered. "I'm choosing stability. You're choosing power." Lucas didn't deny it, because he didn't need to. That's how this world works, he said. The same walls he had believed he controlled, the same rules he had played by, until now. You're going to destroy me, she said quietly. Lucas met her gaze. No, he replied, you're going to destroy yourself. The fallout was immediate, brutal, unforgiving. Clients pulled out, partnerships dissolved. The board initiated an internal investigation. Vanessa was suspended, then removed. Her access revoked, her name stripped from the very company she had built. Her parents didn't call, not at first. When they finally did, it wasn't to support her, it was to confront her. How could you let this happen? Margaret's voice was sharp, cutting through the phone. I didn't. Your name is everywhere, Richard interrupted. Do you have any idea what this is doing to us? Vanessa closed her eyes. To you? Yes, to us, Margaret snapped. Our reputation, our standing, everything is being dragged through this mess. This isn't about you, Vanessa said, her voice breaking despite her effort to hold it together. It has always been about us, Richard said coldly, and you failed. The words landed like a verdict, final, unappealable. That night, Vanessa sat alone in the apartment that once felt like a symbol of everything she had achieved. Now it felt empty, too large, too quiet. Her phone lay on the table, screen dark. No messages, no calls, no one left. She stared at her reflection in the glass window, and for the first time, she didn't recognize the woman looking back. Because everything she had built, everything she had chosen, had led her here. Not because of Ethan, not even because of Lucas, but because of herself. Across the city, Ethan read the news. Not with satisfaction, not with anger, just acknowledgement. He set the tablet down, his expression unchanged. Because this wasn't justice. It was consequence. And sometimes, that was enough. Winter came quietly to New York. Not with a storm, not with drama, but with a slow, steady cold that settled into everything. Buildings, streets, people. The kind of cold that didn't shock you, but stayed long enough to remind you what emptiness felt like. Vanessa Whitmore felt it everywhere. In the silence of her apartment, in the absence of notifications, in the way the city no longer looked at her the same way. Or worse, didn't look at her at all. 3 months after the scandal, her name had disappeared from headlines. Not because she had recovered, but because she had become irrelevant. The investigation had concluded swiftly. Officially, the wording was careful. Executive negligence, failure of oversight, internal mismanagement. Unofficially, everyone knew. She had been the one who fell. Lucas Grant, on the other hand, had not only survived, he had risen. A new partnership, a new position, a new narrative. Clean, untouched, as if she had never existed. Vanessa sat at the edge of her bed, her phone in her hand. The contact had remained untouched for months. One name, Ethan. She had rehearsed this moment countless times, what she would say, how she would say it, but now, staring at the screen, everything felt hollow. Still, she pressed call. The line rang longer than she expected. Once, twice, 3 times. She almost hung up. Then, a click. Yes, his voice. Calm, even. Unfamiliar in its distance. Vanessa's throat tightened. Ethan, it's me. A pause. Not surprised, not curious, just silence. I know, he said. Something inside her shifted. She stopped, her voice catching. Can we meet? Another pause, longer this time. Why? The question was simple, but it held weight. Because there was no easy answer. Please, she said softly. Just once. Silence again. Then, tomorrow, 10 o'clock, my office. The line went dead. The building was taller than she expected. Glass and steel stretching into the winter sky, reflecting a version of the city she no longer belonged to. Vanessa stood at the entrance for a long moment before stepping inside. Everything felt unfamiliar. Not because it had changed, but because she had. Do you have an appointment? The receptionist asked politely. Yes, Vanessa replied, her voice quieter than she remembered it being. Ethan Caldwell. The name felt different now, heavier, more distant. The receptionist checked, then nodded. Top floor. The elevator ride was silent. Each floor passing felt like something tightening in her chest. By the time the doors opened, she almost couldn't breathe. His office was nothing like she expected. Minimal, clean, no unnecessary displays of wealth. Just space, control, and him. Ethan stood by the window, his back to her, the city stretching endlessly beyond the glass. For a moment she didn't speak, because this version of him she didn't know. "I didn't think you'd come," she said finally. Ethan didn't turn immediately. "I said I would." Same voice, same tone, but none of the warmth. He turned then, and their eyes met. Vanessa felt it instantly. Not anger, not resentment, something far worse. Nothing. "You look," she began, then stopped. "Better, stronger, untouchable, different," she finished. Ethan held her gaze. People change. The simplicity of it made her chest ache. "Yes," she whispered, "they do." A silence settled between them, heavy, unavoidable. Vanessa took a step forward, then another. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she said, her voice trembling despite her effort to steady it. "I know what I did. I know how it looked. How it was," Ethan corrected calmly. The words landed without force, but they still hurt. Vanessa nodded slowly. "Yes, how it was," she swallowed. "I was wrong." The admission felt foreign, but necessary. I thought I was choosing strength, stability, a future I could control." Her voice cracked slightly. "But I wasn't. I was choosing fear." Ethan said nothing, because he didn't need to. "I hurt you," she continued, "where you needed me the most. I humiliated you. Her breath faltered. "I didn't just leave," she whispered. "I made sure everyone saw it." Images flashed through her mind. The party, the hospital, the way she had looked at him, like he was nothing. "I know I don't deserve anything from you," she said. "Not even this conversation." Ethan's expression didn't change. "I'm not here to ask for us to go back," she added quickly. "I know that's impossible." Finally something shifted. Not in emotion, but in acknowledgement. "Then why are you here?" he asked. Vanessa hesitated. Because this was the truth she had been avoiding. Her voice softened. "I didn't want to be the person you remember me as." Ethan studied her, for a long moment, as if weighing something. Not her words, but her presence, her existence in his world again. "You're not," he said finally. Vanessa's eyes flickered with something fragile. "I'm not?" "No," Ethan replied. A pause. "You're exactly that person." The words were quiet, but absolute. Vanessa felt something inside her break. Not loudly, not dramatically, just completely. "I've changed," she whispered. Ethan nodded slightly. "I believe you." Hope flickered. Brief, fragile, then, "It doesn't matter." Gone, just like that. Vanessa stared at him, her vision blurring. "It doesn't matter?" Ethan stepped closer. Not aggressively, not emotionally, just enough. "To you, maybe it does," he said, "because you have to live with it." His gaze didn't waver. "But to me?" A pause, carefully measured. "It's already over." The finality of it settled into the room like something irreversible. Vanessa shook her head slightly. "Ethan, please, I don't hate you," he interrupted. That stopped her, because she had expected anger, blame, something. "I don't need to," he continued. "What happened, happened." His voice remained calm, steady. "I lost you long before the hospital," he said. "I just didn't admit it." Vanessa felt the tears now, unstoppable. "And when you left," he added, "you didn't take anything from me." She looked at him, confused, broken. "You showed me exactly what I needed to see." A long silence followed. Then Ethan stepped back, distance restored. "Take care of yourself, Vanessa." Not cold, not cruel, just finished. She didn't remember leaving the building, didn't remember the elevator or the street, only the cold, the quiet, the overwhelming weight of something she could never undo. Weeks passed, then months. Vanessa moved out of the apartment. Smaller place, quieter life. No headlines, no attention, no illusion. Sometimes she would see his name, in articles, in interviews, in quiet, distant mentions of success, and every time it felt further away, like a life she had once touched but no longer belonged to. One evening she stood by her window, watching the city move beneath her. The same city, but not the same world. Her phone remained silent on the table. No calls, no messages, no one waiting. And for the first time, she didn't reach for it. Because she understood now. Some choices didn't just change your life. They defined it. Permanently. Irreversibly. Across the city, Ethan stood by another window. The lights the same, the silence different. He wasn't thinking about her. Not anymore. Because some chapters, once closed, were never meant to be reopened. And in the quiet space between what was and what remained, only one truth endured. Not every loss is a tragedy. Some are consequences, and some are simply the end.